The glass trembled in her hand as she poured another measure of whiskey, amber liquid splashing against the sides of the tumbler, like her memories splashing against the fragile walls she had built around her heart. Scarlett Morgan had arrived in Nebraska City 3 weeks ago with nothing but a leather satchel, a broken pocket watch that had belonged to her father, and enough guilt to drown in. The year was 1873, and the frontier town hummed with the sounds of cattle drives, railroad construction, and men looking to forget their own pasts. She fit right in, or so she told herself every night when she worked behind the bar at the Lucky Star Saloon, pouring drinks for cowboys and drifters who never asked questions. The late afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Scarlett wiped down the bar with practiced efficiency, her dark auburn hair pinned back in a simple bun that did nothing to hide the delicate features of her face. She was 22 years old, though some days she felt ancient. The bruises on her soul did not show, but they ached worse than any physical wound. "Another whiskey, Miss Morgan," called out old Pete from his corner table. He was a harmless drunk who spent his railroad pension money on liquor and never caused trouble. "Coming right up," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She poured the drink and delivered it, accepting his coins with a polite nod. The door swung open, bringing with it a gust of warm September air and a man Scarlett had not seen before. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark blonde hair that curled slightly at his collar. His blue-gray eyes swept the room with the careful assessment of someone who had learned to read danger in an instant. He wore the dust of the trail on his clothes, and a Colt revolver rested easy on his hip. He walked to the bar with a confident stride that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. When he reached the counter, he removed his hat, revealing more of that unruly hair, and offered her a slight smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice a low rumble with a hint of Texas drawl. "I will take a whiskey and whatever information you might have about work in this town." Scarlett poured the drink, avoiding direct eye contact. "Depends on what kind of work you are looking for. The railroad is always hiring, and the ranches around here need hands, especially with winter coming." He took the glass and studied her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Not in the way that most men looked at her, with hunger or calculation, but with genuine curiosity. "Name is Yates Jackson. Most folks call me Jack, Scarlett Morgan." She turned to wipe down bottles that did not need wiping, anything to avoid that penetrating gaze. "You are not from around here," he observed. It was not a question. "Neither are you." Her tone came out sharper than intended. Yates Jackson did not seem offended. He simply nodded and took a sip of his whiskey. "Fair enough. I came up from Texas, working cattle drives mostly. Figured it was time to find something more permanent." Scarlett wanted to tell him that nothing was permanent, that everything you built could crumble in a single night, but she kept her mouth shut. The saloon owner, Frank Hutchins, emerged from the back room carrying a crate of bottles. He was a portly man in his 50s with a kind face and shrewd business sense. "Jack Yates," Frank's face broke into a wide grin. "Heard you might be heading this way. Tommy Brennan sent word from Omaha." Yates set down his glass and shook Frank's hand warmly. "Good to see you, Frank. Tommy said you might know of ranches looking for a foreman." As a matter of fact, the Callaway Ranch about 10 miles west of town has been looking since their last foreman quit. Old Samuel Callaway is a good man, runs about 3,000 head. He would be lucky to have someone with your experience. Frank glanced at Scarlett. "I see you have met my best bartender." "She pours a fine whiskey," Yates said, and there was something in his tone that made Scarlett look up despite herself. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Scarlett felt something shift inside her chest, like a door she had nailed shut rattling in its frame. She looked away quickly, her heart beating faster than it should. Frank continued talking about the Callaway Ranch, giving directions and advice, while Scarlett busied herself with preparing for the evening rush. More patrons trickled in as the sun sank lower, ranch hands and railroad workers looking to wash away the dust and fatigue of their day. The noise level rose, filling the saloon with raucous laughter and off-key singing from the piano player in the corner. Yates Jackson stayed at the bar, nursing his whiskey and occasionally making conversation with Frank or other patrons who recognized him. Scarlett noticed that people seemed to respect him, greeting him with genuine warmth rather than the wary politeness most strangers received. He had the kind of reputation that preceded him, apparently, though she could not tell if that was good or bad. Around 8 o'clock, trouble walked through the door in the form of Wade Garrett and his 2 brothers. The Garretts owned a small spread north of town and had a reputation for drinking too much and starting fights. Wade, the eldest at 30, had been bothering Scarlett since her second day in Nebraska City, making comments and trying to corner her when Frank was not looking. Well, if it is not the pretty little mystery lady," Wade slurred, already drunk from wherever he had been before arriving. His brothers, Carl and Robert, flanked him like a pair of mean dogs. "How about you pour us some drinks and give us a smile, sweetheart?" Scarlett kept her expression neutral. "3 whiskeys. That is right, and make them generous." Wade leaned across the bar, his breath reeking of alcohol and tobacco. "You know, you never did tell me where you came from. A woman as pretty as you must be running from something. Or someone." Her hands shook as she poured the drinks, but she forced them steady through sheer willpower. "That will be $2, Wade laughed, a nasty sound that made her skin crawl. $2. That is highway robbery. How about this, you come out with me after your shift and I will pay for the whole night's drinks?" The lady said $2. Yates Jackson's voice cut through the noise of the saloon like a knife. He had stood up from his bar stool and now faced Wade with a relaxed posture that somehow managed to convey coiled danger. Wade turned, sizing up the newcomer. "This is not your business, stranger. I am making it my business." Yates stepped closer, and despite being roughly the same height as Wade, he seemed bigger somehow. "Pay for your drinks and leave the lady alone." For a moment, Scarlett thought Wade would back down. His brothers certainly looked like they wanted to, shifting nervously and glancing at each other. But Wade's pride and alcohol-soaked brain made a different choice. "You want to dance, Cowboy?" Wade's hand drifted toward his gun. The entire saloon went quiet. Frank moved toward the situation, but Yates held up a hand to stop him. "I do not want to dance," Yates said calmly. "I want you to apologize to Miss Morgan, pay for your drinks, and leave peacefully. That is your best option here." Wade's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. His brothers had already started backing toward the door, their survival instincts stronger than their loyalty. Scarlett held her breath, her mind flashing back to another confrontation, another man with violence in his eyes, another night that ended in blood and horror. "Wade." Frank's voice carried authority. "You are drunk and outnumbered. Every man in this saloon will testify that you drew first if this goes bad. Think about your mama and what this would do to her." The mention of his mother seemed to penetrate Wade's drunken fury. He glared at Yates, then at Scarlett, then threw some coins on the bar. "This is not over," he muttered before stalking out, his brothers hurrying after him. The saloon slowly returned to its normal noise level. Scarlett realized she had been gripping the edge of the bar so hard her knuckles had turned white. She released it slowly, taking a shaky breath. "You all right, miss?" Yates had returned to his seat at the bar, his expression concerned. "I am fine," she lied, pouring herself a small measure of whiskey with trembling hands. She never drank on the job, but right now she needed it. "He has been bothering you before?" Again, not a question. Scarlett drank the whiskey in one burning swallow. "I can handle Wade Garrett." "I do not doubt that," Yates said quietly, "but you should not have to." Something about his tone, the genuine respect in it, made tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away furiously. "Why did you do that? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Yates was quiet for a moment, turning his glass between his hands. "My mama raised me to believe that a man's character shows in how he treats people who cannot fight back. Wade Garrett is a bully and a coward. Someone needed to stand up to him. You could have been killed," he shrugged. "Could get killed crossing the street. At least this would have been for a good reason." Despite everything, Scarlett felt a small smile tug at her lips. It felt strange, like muscles she had forgotten how to use. "You are either very brave or very foolish. Probably a bit of both," Yates admitted with a grin. "My mama would vote for foolish." "Is your mother here in Nebraska?" The grin faded. "No, madam. She passed 3 years ago. Cholera." "My pa went 6 months after, just lost the will to live without her, I think." "I am sorry." The words felt inadequate, but they were sincere. "Thank you. They had 40 good years together, which is more than most folks get." He finished his whiskey and stood, placing his hat back on his head. "I should get going. Find a place to stay before it gets too late. Thank you for the drink and the conversation, Miss Morgan. There is a boarding house 2 streets over, Mrs. Henderson's place. Clean rooms, fair prices. Much appreciated." He tipped his hat to her and then to Frank before walking out into the night. Scarlett watched him go, feeling oddly bereft. Frank came over and patted her shoulder gently. "Jack Yates is one of the good ones. Knew his father years back, honest as they come." "I am sure he is," Scarlett said, turning back to her work. But for the rest of the night, she found her thoughts drifting back to blue-gray eyes and a gentle Texas drawl. The next few days passed in their usual routine. Scarlett woke in her small room above the saloon, washed and dressed, helped Frank with morning cleaning, and worked the bar from afternoon until late night. She spoke to customers politely, but never encouraged conversation. She poured whiskey for others, and when no one was looking, poured it for herself, trying to drown the memories that haunted her. Back east in Philadelphia, she had been engaged to a man named Charles Whitmore. He had seemed charming and successful, a banker's son with good prospects. Her father, a shopkeeper, had been thrilled with the match. Her mother had died when Scarlett was 16, and her father wanted to see her settled before he got too old. But Charles had another side, one he hid well until after the engagement was announced. The first time he hit her, he had apologized profusely, blamed it on stress at work, promised it would never happen again. She had believed him, wanted to believe him. The second time, he had said she provoked him by disagreeing with him in front of his friends. The third time, he had not bothered with excuses. Scarlett had hidden the bruises and made excuses for months, trapped by shame and her father's joy at the upcoming wedding. Then one night, Charles had come to her father's shop after closing, drunk and enraged about something at work. He had grabbed her, and when her father intervened, Charles had shoved him. Her father, already weak from a weak heart, had fallen and struck his head on the corner of the counter. He had died 3 days later, never regaining consciousness. Charles's family had money and influence. They spun a story about a robbery gone wrong, a mysterious intruder who had fled into the night. Scarlett, drowning in grief and guilt, had known the truth would never be believed. She had taken what little money her father left her and run, traveling west until she reached a place where no one knew her name or her shame. And every night, she poured whiskey to forget. But forgetting was harder than she expected. On the fourth day after Yates Jackson arrived in town, Scarlett was washing glasses when he walked into the saloon in the early afternoon. He looked cleaner, freshly shaved, wearing a new shirt under his vest. "Afternoon, Miss Morgan." He greeted her with that easy smile. "Mr. Jackson." She nodded politely. "Did you get the job at the Calloway Ranch?" "I did. Started yesterday. Mr. Calloway is a fair man and the operation is well run. I came into town for supplies and thought I would stop by to thank you properly for the information." "You already thanked me." "Then maybe I am just looking for an excuse to see you again." The words were forward, but something about the way he said them, with genuine warmth rather than presumption, kept them from being offensive. Scarlett felt heat rise to her cheeks. She was not used to blushing, had thought that capacity had died with her father. "That is very direct of you." "Life is too short for games, Miss Morgan. I find you interesting, and I would like to get to know you better. If that is too forward, I apologize, but I believe in honest speaking." She poured him a whiskey without being asked. "I am not interesting, Mr. Jackson. I am just someone trying to get by." "Everyone has a story," he said, accepting the glass. "And I have a feeling yours is one worth hearing whenever you are ready to tell it." "What makes you think I would tell you anything?" Yates was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching her face. "I see something in you, Miss Morgan, a kind of hurt I recognize. I am not asking you to trust me right now. Trust takes time. I am just asking if maybe you might let me try to earn it." Scarlett's throat tightened. She wanted to say no, wanted to tell him to leave her alone, that she was not worth the effort. But another part of her, a part she thought had died in Philadelphia, whispered that maybe, just maybe, not everyone was like Charles Whitmore. "I work most evenings," she said finally, the words feeling like a confession. "I know. But you must get days off. Maybe you would let me take you to dinner at the hotel restaurant. They say the food is decent." "I do not know. Think about it," Yates said gently. "I will be back in town in a few days. If you say yes, we will have dinner. If you say no, I will respect that, though I will probably try again later." He grinned, taking any sting out of the words. Despite herself, Scarlett felt that strange smile pulling at her lips again. "You are persistent." "When something is worth having, yes, madam, I am." He finished his whiskey, paid, and left her with a tip of his hat and a warm look that stayed with her long after he departed. Frank emerged from the back, where he had clearly been eavesdropping. "You should say yes." "Frank." "I am serious, Scarlett. I do not know what you are running from, and I am not asking. But that young man is quality, and he looks at you like you hung the moon. Those chances do not come along often." "I am not ready for this," Scarlett said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then tell him that. But do not shut him out completely. Sometimes the things we think we are not ready for are exactly what we need." Over the next week, Scarlett found herself thinking about Yates Jackson more than she cared to admit. She poured whiskey for customers and herself, but the forgetting was getting harder. Instead of forgetting, she found herself remembering things she had buried, not just the bad but the good too. Her mother's laugh, her father's pride when she learned to read. The girl she had been before Charles Whitmore twisted her into someone afraid of her own shadow. Yates came to town twice more, stopping by the saloon both times. He did not pressure her about dinner, just talked to her about small things. The weather, the ranch, a funny story about a stubborn calf. He made her laugh, genuine laughter that felt rusty and new at the same time. On his third visit, Scarlett made a decision. When he asked again about dinner, she said yes. They arranged to meet on Sunday afternoon, her day off. Scarlett spent far too long getting ready, changing dresses 3 times before settling on a simple blue cotton dress with white trim that brought out the color of her eyes. She had not cared about her appearance in months, had actively tried to make herself invisible. Now she found herself pinning her hair up carefully and even applying a touch of rose water. Yates was waiting outside the hotel restaurant, looking handsome in a clean shirt and vest, his hair combed back. His face lit up when he saw her approach, and he offered his arm like a perfect gentleman. "You look beautiful, Miss Morgan." "Thank you. You look very nice as well." The restaurant was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasted meat wafting from the kitchen. Yates pulled out her chair before taking his own seat, and they ordered roast chicken with vegetables. For the first few minutes, conversation was stilted, both of them suddenly awkward. Then Yates asked about her favorite book, and Scarlett found herself talking about Jane Eyre, which led to a discussion of literature and education. Yates had been taught to read by his mother, who had been a schoolteacher before marriage, and he had a genuine love of books despite his practical cowboy exterior. "I always carry a book in my saddlebag," he admitted. "Right now it is The Count of Monte Cristo. Revenge and redemption, all wrapped up together." "Do you believe in redemption?" The question came out before Scarlett could stop it. Yates considered it seriously. "I believe people can change if they want to and work at it. I have seen men do terrible things and then spend the rest of their lives trying to make up for it. Cannot say if that is redemption exactly, but it is something." "What if the thing you did cannot be made up for?" He looked at her with those perceptive eyes. "I think most things can be forgiven, Miss Morgan. Maybe not all, but most. And sometimes the person we need forgiveness from the most is ourselves." Tears pricked at Scarlett's eyes, and she looked down at her plate, fighting for composure. Yates reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his own. It was a simple gesture, not presumptuous, just offering comfort. "Whatever happened back east," he said quietly, "whatever you are running from, it does not change who you are right now, sitting here with me. You do not know what I have done." "You are right, I do not. But I know what I see. I see a woman who works hard, treats people with kindness even when they do not deserve it, and who pours whiskey to forget things that hurt too much to remember. I see someone worth knowing, worth caring about." Scarlett looked up, meeting his eyes. "I am broken, Yates." "So am I," he said simply. "Lost my whole family, watched my mama waste away, held my pa while he cried himself to sleep at night. We are all broken in some way. Question is whether we let that breaking be the end of our story or just a chapter." Something shifted in Scarlett's chest, that door she had nailed shut opening just a crack. "I was engaged," she heard herself saying, "back in Philadelphia, to a man who hurt me. My father tried to protect me, and he died because of it, because of me." Yates's hand tightened on hers, his jaw clenching. "Tell me." So she did. The words came pouring out like the whiskey she had been drinking for months, the whole terrible story. Charles's abuse, her father's death, the lies and cover-up, her flight west. She expected Yates to pull away, to look at her with disgust or pity. Instead, his eyes blazed with anger, but not at her. "Where is this Charles Whitmore now?" His voice was dangerous, controlled fury barely leashed. "Still in Philadelphia, I assume. His family protected him. He probably married some other poor girl by now. He should hang for what he did. But he will not. Men like him never pay for their crimes. They have money and power and connections." Yates was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "You did not kill your father, Scarlett. That bastard did. You were a victim trying to survive. I should have stopped him, should have left earlier, should have told someone. Should have, could have, would have. Those words will eat you alive if you let them." Yates squeezed her hand gently. You survived. You got out. That took more courage than most people ever need to find. Scarlett felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for the first time in months they felt cleansing rather than poisonous. I do not feel courageous. I feel like a coward who ran away. Running away from danger is not cowardice. It is survival. Cowardice would have been staying and letting him destroy you completely. Yates pulled out a handkerchief and handed it to her. You are here, alive, making a new life. That is brave, Scarlett. That is strong. They sat there in the restaurant, hands linked across the table, while Scarlett cried quietly and Yates offered silent support. Other patrons glanced at them but looked away quickly, giving them privacy. When Scarlett finally composed herself, she felt lighter somehow, as if speaking the truth had released some of the poison festering inside her. I am sorry. This is not much of a first dinner. This is the most important dinner I have ever had, Yates said seriously. Because you trusted me enough to tell me the truth. That means everything, Scarlett. They finished their meal in more comfortable silence, and Yates walked her back to the saloon. Outside the entrance, he turned to face her, his expression earnest. I want to see you again. Not just in the saloon when I come to town, but like this, properly. I want to court you if you will let me. Scarlett's heart hammered in her chest. The old fear reared up, whispering warnings, but beneath it was something else. Hope, tentative and fragile, but real. I am afraid, she admitted. I know. But I am not him, Scarlett. I would never hurt you. You would have to tell me if I ever did something that made you uncomfortable, and I would stop immediately. You would have all the control here. You promise. On my parents' graves, I promise. Scarlett took a deep breath. All right. Yes, you can court me. Yates's face broke into a brilliant smile. You will not regret this. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, a gesture so sweet and old-fashioned that Scarlett felt her heart flutter. Then he tipped his hat and headed back toward the boarding house, leaving her standing in the fading sunlight with a strange feeling blooming in her chest. Over the following weeks, Yates courted Scarlett with a patience and gentleness that slowly dissolved her fears. He came to town every Sunday, and they would spend the afternoon together. Sometimes they ate dinner at the restaurant. Other times they walked along the Missouri River, talking about everything and nothing. Yates told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, learning to ride before he could properly walk, helping his father during the brutal summers and harsh winters. He spoke about his mother's death with a sadness that never quite left his eyes, and how watching his father give up on life had taught him that love could be both the most beautiful and most devastating thing in the world. I want what they had, he admitted one afternoon as they sat by the river, watching the water flow past. That kind of love that makes you whole, but I am also terrified of it, of loving someone so much that losing them destroys you. That is a terrible risk, Scarlett agreed, drawing her knees up to her chest. But maybe worth it. I keep thinking about what my pa said before he died. He told me that even knowing how it would end, he would choose my mama again every single time. That 40 years of happiness was worth the pain at the end. Scarlett rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture that had become natural between them. I think your father was a wise man. He would have liked you, Yates said, wrapping an arm around her. My mama, too. She always said the strongest women were the ones who survived being broken and put themselves back together. I am still working on the putting myself back together part. That is all right. I will help hold the pieces until you are ready. Scarlett turned her head to look up at him, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. It was not the hungry, possessive look Charles had given her, the one that made her feel like property. This was different, warm and deep and respectful. This was a look that saw her as a person, not a possession. Yates, she whispered. Yes, will you kiss me? His eyes searched her face. "Are you sure? I am terrified, but I trust you, please." Yates cupped her face gently with both hands, giving her every opportunity to change her mind or pull away. When she did not, he lowered his lips to hers in a kiss so tender it made her heart ache. It was nothing like the brutal, claiming kisses Charles had forced on her. This was a question and an answer, a promise and a hope. When they finally pulled apart, Scarlett was crying again, but this time from happiness rather than pain. "That was perfect. You are perfect," Yates said, brushing away her tears with his thumbs. "I am not perfect for me then." As autumn deepened into winter, their relationship grew stronger. Scarlett found herself pouring less whiskey for herself and remembering more. Not just the bad memories, but the good ones too. She told Yates about her mother, about working in her father's shop, about dreams she had once had of maybe teaching school someday. "You could still do that," Yates encouraged. "Nebraska City needs more teachers. I never finished my own education properly, so finish it. I will help you study if you want." The idea took root in Scarlett's mind, growing into something real. She started borrowing books from the small lending library in town, studying in the mornings before her shift at the saloon. Yates brought her books from the ranch. One Samuel Calloway's wife was willing to loan. Frank watched this transformation with approval. "You are coming back to life, girl. It is good to see." "Yates makes me want to be better," Scarlett confessed one quiet afternoon. "Then he is good for you. But remember, you were always worth being better. You just needed someone to remind you." Christmas came, and Yates gave Scarlett a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For your thoughts," he explained. "My mama always said writing things down helped make sense of them." Scarlett gave him a new edition of The Count of Monte Cristo, since his copy was falling apart from repeated readings. They spent Christmas Day at the Calloway Ranch, where Scarlett was welcomed warmly by Samuel and his wife Margaret, along with their 3 children. Being around a loving family was both painful and healing for Scarlett. She saw what a real marriage looked like, how Samuel treated Margaret with respect and affection, how they navigated disagreements with discussion rather than violence. She saw what she had almost lost hope of ever having. On New Year's Eve, as 1873 turned to 1874, Yates and Scarlett stood outside the saloon watching the town celebrate. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, no longer flinching at unexpected touches. "This is going to be a good year," Yates said confidently. "I can feel it." "What makes you so sure?" "Because I have you in my life, and that makes everything better." Scarlett stood on her toes and kissed him, pouring into it all the feelings she was still learning to express with words. When they broke apart, both breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Scarlett Morgan. I have loved you since the day I walked into that saloon and saw you standing behind the bar trying to be invisible. I love your strength and your kindness and your wounded heart that is learning to beat again." Scarlett's breath caught. She had not expected those words, not yet, though she had felt them growing between them. "I love you too," she whispered, and saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff into open air, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Yates pulled her into a tight embrace, and they stood there in the cold winter night, holding each other while the town celebrated around them. The new year brought changes. In February, Wade Garrett made the mistake of getting drunk and starting trouble at the saloon again. This time, Yates was there, and the confrontation ended with Wade nursing a broken nose and Yates warning him that if he ever bothered Scarlett again, a broken nose would be the least of his problems. The sheriff, a practical man who had dealt with Wade's nonsense for years, declared it self-defense and told Wade to stay away from the Lucky Star. Wade and his brothers left town a week later, heading to Wyoming Territory, and Scarlett felt a weight lift from her shoulders. In March, Yates asked Scarlett to marry him. They were sitting by the river again, watching the ice break up and flow downstream when he pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "The only thing of value my mama owned, and she left it to me with instructions to give it to someone worthy. You are worthy, Scarlett. You are everything I never knew I was looking for." Scarlett looked at the ring, then at Yates's earnest face. A year ago, the idea of marriage would have terrified her. Now, with this man, it felt right. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in April, in a small ceremony at the church with Frank, the Calloways, and a few other friends in attendance. Scarlett wore a simple white dress that Margaret Calloway had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers that Yates had picked that morning. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed her with such joy and reverence that Scarlett felt tears sliding down her cheeks. These were happy tears, though, tears of gratitude and hope, and a future she had not believed possible. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, in a room Yates had splurged on, with actual wallpaper and a large bed with a real mattress. He was gentle and patient, letting Scarlett set the pace, constantly checking to make sure she was comfortable and willing. "We can stop any time," he assured her. "I do not want to stop," Scarlett said, cupping his face. "I want this, I want you, I am just a little nervous." "So am I," Yates admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "I want this to be perfect for you. It already is perfect because it is you." Their joining was tender and sweet, nothing like the fear and pain Scarlett had associated with physical intimacy. Yates made her feel cherished and beautiful, and when they finally lay together in the darkness, tangled in each other's arms, Scarlett felt a sense of wholeness she had never experienced before. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too, Mrs. Jackson. Mrs. Jackson." Scarlett turned the name over in her mind, trying it on like a new dress. It fit perfectly. They moved into a small house on the Calloway Ranch, part of Yates's compensation as foreman. It was just 3 rooms, but it was theirs, and Scarlett threw herself into making it a home. She sewed curtains, planted a small garden, and slowly began to unpack the dreams she had stored away. She also continued her studies, and by the summer of 1874, felt confident enough to approach the local school board about a teaching position. They were skeptical at first. A young married woman with no formal training, but Margaret Calloway advocated for her, and Scarlett's obvious intelligence and passion won them over. She started teaching in September, a one-room schoolhouse with 15 children ranging from 6 to 14. It was challenging and exhausting and absolutely wonderful. For the first time since her father's death, Scarlett felt like herself again, like the person she had been meant to become before Charles Whitmore twisted her life into something dark. Yates supported her completely, proud of his wife's accomplishments. He would come home from long days managing the ranch and listen to her stories about her students, offering advice and encouragement. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. They had disagreements, learning to navigate each other's habits and expectations. There were moments when Scarlett's old fears surfaced, times when she flinched without meaning to or braced herself for violence that never came. The first time she accidentally broke a plate and instinctively cowered, waiting for a blow. Yates had stopped in his tracks, his face stricken. "Scarlett," he said softly, carefully, "I am not going to hit you. I will never hit you. It is just a plate. We have others." Scarlett had started crying, ashamed of her reaction. Yates had held her while she sobbed, whispering reassurances, reminding her that healing was not linear, that setbacks were normal and okay. "We will get through this together," he promised. "However long it takes, I am not going anywhere." And he did not. Through bad days and good days, through nightmares and triggers, through the slow, painful work of healing, Yates stayed. He learned her boundaries and respected them. He celebrated her victories, no matter how small, and held her through her defeats. By their first anniversary, Scarlett could honestly say she was happy. The guilt over her father's death would probably never fully leave her, but it had softened into a bearable sadness rather than a crushing weight. She had written to her father's lawyer back in Philadelphia, ensuring his shop and remaining belongings were handled properly, and had even sent money for a proper headstone for his grave. She had not contacted the authorities about Charles. That bridge was too far to cross, the wound still too fresh. Maybe someday, but not yet. In June of 1875, Scarlett discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She had not planned for this so soon, had not thought about bringing a child into the world when she was still healing herself. When she told Yates, he swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby, Scarlett, we are going to have a baby." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Scarlett found her fear melting into excitement. "We are going to be parents. You are going to be the best mother," Yates said, setting her down and placing a hand on her still flat stomach. "Our child is so lucky. I hope I can be good enough." "You will be perfect. You love with your whole heart, Scarlett. That is all any child needs." The pregnancy was difficult. Scarlett suffered from severe morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester, and the Nebraska summer heat made her miserable. Margaret Calloway, who had birthed 3 children herself, became an invaluable source of advice and support. Scarlett had to stop teaching as she grew larger, and she found herself restless, missing her students. The children had made her cards wishing her well, and she treasured each one. In February of 1876, after a long and difficult labor, Scarlett gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Daniel Thomas Jackson, after both their fathers. When the midwife placed the squalling infant in her arms, Scarlett felt a love so fierce and consuming it took her breath away. "Hello, Daniel," she whispered, tracing his tiny features. "Hello, sweet boy." Yates sat beside the bed, his arm around Scarlett, staring at their son with wonder and awe. "He is perfect. You did so well, sweetheart. We made a person," Scarlett said, half laughing, half crying. "An actual person. We sure did." The first months of parenthood were exhausting. Daniel was colicky and fussy, crying for hours on end despite their best efforts. Scarlett and Yates took turns walking him, singing to him, trying everything they could think of to soothe him. There were moments of frustration and despair, times when Scarlett wondered if she was equipped for this massive responsibility. But there were also moments of pure transcendence, when Daniel would stop crying and look at her with those unfocused infant eyes, or when he would fall asleep on Yates's chest, tiny fist curled against his father's shirt. Slowly, they found their rhythm. Daniel grew out of his colic and became a happier baby, full of smiles and giggles. Scarlett discovered reserves of patience she did not know she possessed, and Yates proved himself to be a devoted and hands-on father, never treating childcare as solely his wife's responsibility. By Daniel's first birthday, Scarlett had returned to teaching part-time, with Margaret Calloway watching Daniel while she taught morning classes. It was a good balance, allowing her to pursue her passion while also being present for her son. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. The Calloways became like family, their children treating Daniel like a beloved cousin. Frank at the saloon hired a new bartender, but Scarlett still stopped by occasionally to help out and visit with her old boss, who had become a dear friend. In the fall of 1877, Scarlett discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. In May of 1878, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Jackson, after Yates's mother. Rose was a calmer baby than Daniel had been, with her father's blue-gray eyes and her mother's auburn hair. Daniel, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to constantly hold her and show her his toys. "Gentle, Daniel," Scarlett would remind him as he petted Rose's downy hair. "She is very small." "Baby sister," Daniel would say proudly, his favorite new phrase. Watching Yates with their children filled Scarlett with a contentment she had never imagined possible. He was patient and playful, teaching Daniel to ride a gentle mare, reading stories at bedtime, rocking Rose to sleep while humming old cowboy songs. "You are an amazing father," Scarlett told him one evening as they sat on their porch, watching Daniel chase fireflies in the gathering dusk while Rose slept in her cradle. "I have a good teacher," Yates replied, pulling Scarlett close. "You show me every day what it means to love without reservation." "I learned that from you," Scarlett said, resting her head on his shoulder. "You taught me that love does not have to hurt, that it can heal instead." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son play, their daughter sleep, surrounded by the life they had built together from the ashes of their respective pasts. In 1879, Samuel Calloway offered Yates a partnership in the ranch. His own sons had no interest in ranching, preferring to pursue business opportunities in Omaha, and Samuel wanted to ensure his legacy continued with someone who cared about the land. It was a generous offer, one that would secure their family's future. Yates accepted after discussing it thoroughly with Scarlett, and they celebrated with a dinner at the Calloway's house, their children running around while the adults talked about plans and dreams. "You deserve this," Scarlett told Yates later that night. "You have worked so hard." "We deserve this," Yates corrected. "None of it would mean anything without you and the children." As the new decade dawned in 1880, Scarlett looked back on the 7 years since she had arrived in Nebraska City with wonder. That broken, terrified woman who had poured whiskey to forget seemed like a different person now. She had been transformed by love, by healing, by the grace of a man who had seen past her wounds to the person she could become. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at unexpected loud noises. The scars from Charles's abuse would probably never fully fade, but they no longer defined her. She was Scarlett Jackson now, wife and mother, teacher and rancher's wife. She was loved and cherished, and she loved fiercely in return. In the spring of 1880, a letter arrived from Philadelphia. Scarlett's hands shook as she opened it, fearing news from Charles or his family. Instead, it was from a woman named Alice Whitmore, Charles's younger sister. The letter was brief but significant. Alice wrote that Charles had died the previous winter in a riding accident, drunk and alone. But more importantly, she wrote to apologize. She had discovered the truth about Charles's nature from his second wife, who had left him after suffering similar abuse. Alice had gathered evidence and spoken to authorities, ensuring that Charles's crimes were documented even if he would never face earthly justice. "I am sorry I did not believe you," Alice wrote. "I am sorry my family protected him and let him hurt you. You deserved better, and I hope you have found it wherever you are." Scarlett stood in her kitchen, holding the letter as emotions washed over her. Relief that Charles was dead and could never hurt anyone again. Sadness for the years lost to fear and shame. Gratitude that someone from his family had acknowledged the truth. When Yates came home that evening, she showed him the letter. He read it carefully, then pulled her into his arms. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," Scarlett said after a long moment. "I feel free." He is really gone, and someone finally knows the truth. It does not bring my father back, but it means something. It matters. Your father would be proud of you, Yates said softly. Of the life you have built, the woman you have become. I hope so. I like to think he is watching somewhere, seeing that I am happy. You are happy, are you not? Scarlett pulled back to look at her husband's face, this good man who had given her a reason to remember that life could be beautiful. I am happier than I ever thought possible. You gave me that, Yates. You and our children and this life we have made together. You gave it to yourself, Yates corrected gently. I just provided a safe place for you to heal. You did the hard work, Scarlett. You chose to live, to love, to hope again. That was all you. They stood together in the fading light, holding each other, while their children played in the next room and the Nebraska prairie stretched out endlessly around them. In 1882, Daniel started school, and Scarlett had the joy of teaching her own son for part of the year. He was bright and curious, with his father's easy charm and his mother's love of books. Rose, now 4, was already showing signs of the same intelligence, demanding stories and learning her letters early. The ranch prospered under Yates's management. He hired on 2 additional hands, and they increased their cattle operations significantly. The railroad continued to expand through Nebraska, making it easier to ship cattle to eastern markets. The Jackson family became well respected in the community, known for their fairness and integrity. Scarlett continued teaching, eventually becoming the head teacher when the school expanded to 2 rooms. She took particular interest in students who seemed troubled or withdrawn, understanding from personal experience what it meant to carry hidden wounds. More than one child found in her a confidante and advocate, someone who saw them and cared. In 1884, Scarlett gave birth to their 3rd child, another son they named James Samuel Jackson, after Samuel Calloway, who had become like a father to Yates. James was born in the middle of a thunderstorm, arriving so quickly the midwife barely made it in time. This one is in a hurry, the midwife laughed as she cleaned the squalling infant. James continued that pattern, meeting every milestone early and keeping his parents constantly on their toes. He was fearless where Daniel was cautious, bold where Rose was thoughtful. Together, the 3 Jackson children were a formidable force, filling the house with noise and laughter and chaos. There were hard times, too. In the winter of 1885, a blizzard hit Nebraska with devastating force. They lost part of their herd, and several families in the area suffered tragedies. The Jacksons opened their home to neighbors whose houses had been damaged, sheltering 3 families until the spring thaw allowed for rebuilding. During those long winter months, crammed into close quarters with extra people, Scarlett demonstrated the strength and grace that had become her hallmark. She organized the children into helping with chores, created schoolwork to keep young minds occupied, and ensured everyone was fed and warm despite the crowding. "You are a natural leader," Margaret Calloway told her one evening as they prepared dinner for the extended household. "You should be on the town council." "Women cannot serve on the council," Scarlett reminded her. "Then maybe it is time that changed. This is 1885, not 1785. Women are running businesses, homesteading their own land, teaching school. Why should we not have a voice in town government?" The conversation planted a seed in Scarlett's mind. Over the following months, she and Margaret, along with several other women in the community, began organizing to push for female representation on local boards and committees. It was slow, frustrating work, but they made progress, gaining support from progressive men like Yates and Samuel Calloway. In 1886, Scarlett was appointed to the school board, the first woman to serve in that capacity in Nebraska City. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental to her. The frightened girl who had fled Philadelphia would never have imagined standing before a room of men and advocating for educational reforms. Daniel was now 10, excelling in school and dreaming of someday becoming a veterinarian. He had inherited his father's way with animals and spent every spare moment at the stables or following Yates around the ranch. Rose, at 8, had declared her intention to become a teacher like her mother, and was already helping younger students with their lessons. James, at 2, was mostly interested in getting into everything he could reach and terrorizing the family dog, a patient old hound named Biscuit. Life was full and busy and good. There were still days when Scarlett felt the shadows of her past creeping in, moments when she would catch sight of a dark-haired man who reminded her of Charles and feel her chest tighten with old fear. But those moments grew fewer and further between, and she had Yates to anchor her, to remind her that she was safe and loved. In the fall of 1887, Frank Hutchins fell ill. The old saloon keeper had been declining for months, though he had hidden it well. Scarlett visited him daily, bringing soup and reading to him when he was too weak to do it himself. "You turned out all right, girl," Frank told her one afternoon, his voice thin and raspy. "When you first showed up at my saloon, you were like a wounded animal. Thought you might not make it, to be honest, but you proved me wrong." "You gave me a chance when I needed one," Scarlett said, holding his gnarled hand. "You did not ask questions or judge. You just gave me work and safety. I will never forget that. It was not much. It was everything." Frank died peacefully in his sleep a week later. The entire town turned out for his funeral, testament to the affection in which he was held. Scarlett wept openly, grieving for the man who had been her first friend in Nebraska City, who had seen potential in her when she could not see it in herself. After Frank's death, his niece inherited the Lucky Star Saloon. She was a practical woman with no interest in running a drinking establishment, and sold it to a businessman from Omaha who turned it into a hotel. Scarlett felt a pang at seeing the old saloon transformed, but she understood that change was inevitable. Frank would not mind, Yates told her as they stood across the street, watching workers paint over the Lucky Star sign. He always said that place was just bricks and wood. The important stuff was the people. He was a wise man. He was, and he thought the world of you. In 1888, Samuel Calloway retired completely, turning the ranch operation over to Yates. It was bittersweet, marking the end of an era, but Samuel was ready to rest after decades of hard work. He and Margaret moved into a smaller house in town, though they remained close with the Jackson family, treating the children like their own grandchildren. That same year, Scarlett received another letter from Philadelphia, this one from her father's old friend Robert Chen. Robert had purchased her father's shop years ago and had been maintaining it in his memory. Now elderly himself, Robert wanted to pass along something he had found while organizing old records, a journal her father had kept. The journal arrived a month later, carefully wrapped and insured. Scarlett opened it with trembling hands, seeing her father's familiar handwriting for the first time in 15 years. Tears blurred her vision as she read his entries, mundane details of shop life mixed with his thoughts and feelings. There were entries about her mother's death, raw grief poured onto the page. Entries about raising Scarlett alone, his fears and hopes for her future. And then, toward the end, entries about Charles Whitmore. Her father had not been fooled by Charles's charm. He had seen something wrong, something dangerous, but had not known how to protect his daughter without alienating her. The final entry, written the day before his death, made Scarlett sob. "I have decided to confront Charles directly," her father wrote. "Scarlett thinks she hides the bruises, but I see them. I see how she flinches, how the light has gone from her eyes. Better to risk her anger at my interference than watch her destroyed by that monster. If something happens to me, I pray she finds the strength to leave him. She deserves happiness, my beautiful girl. She deserves to be loved the way her mother loved me. Yates found her on the porch, clutching the journal and crying. He sat beside her and she read him the final entry. He knew, she whispered. He died trying to protect me. He was a good father, Yates said, his own eyes wet. And he succeeded, Scarlett. Maybe not the way he intended, but he saved you. That confrontation, as terrible as it was, gave you the push you needed to leave. His death was not in vain. I miss him so much. I know, sweetheart, I know. They sat together as the sun set, Scarlett grieving anew while Yates offered the comfort of his presence. Later, she placed the journal in a special box with other family treasures, things to pass down to their children someday. The years continued to roll by, marked by milestones and memories. Daniel turned 14 and was already as tall as his father, helping run the ranch with increasing responsibility. Rose was 12 and had developed her mother's passion for education, along with a stubborn streak that both delighted and frustrated her parents. James was 6, full of energy and mischief, the family clown who could make anyone laugh. In 1890, Scarlett turned 39. It seemed impossible that 17 years had passed since she arrived in Nebraska City, broken and afraid. Now she was a respected member of the community, a teacher, a mother, a wife. She had built a life beyond her wildest dreams from the ashes of tragedy. For her birthday, Yates took her back to the spot by the river where they had first kissed. The children were with Margaret Calloway for the afternoon, giving them rare time alone. "Remember sitting here all those years ago?" Yates asked as they settled on the riverbank. "How could I forget? I was so scared of everything, including you." "Especially me, I think," Scarlett laughed. "Maybe. You saw through all my defenses and that terrified me." "You were worth the effort," Yates said, taking her hand. "Every moment of patience, every setback, every victory. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Scarlett Jackson. We are pretty good together, are not we? We are perfect together." They kissed, a sweet reminder of that first tentative kiss 17 years earlier. So much had changed, and yet some things remained constant. The river still flowed, the prairie still stretched endlessly, and their love still anchored them both. In 1891, Daniel announced his intention to attend veterinary school in Omaha. It was a major decision, one that would take him away from home for the first time. Scarlett had mixed feelings, proud of her son's ambition but sad to see him leave. "He will come back," Yates assured her. "Nebraska is in his blood. He will study and learn and come back to make the ranch better. I know. It is just hard to watch them grow up." "It is, but we raised him to be independent and follow his dreams. Now we have to let him." They sent Daniel off in the fall with their blessings and enough money for tuition and board. He returned for holidays, full of stories about his studies and the wider world. Scarlett saw her father in him, that same gentle intelligence and curiosity. Rose was becoming a young woman, caught between childhood and adulthood in that awkward, painful way. She had inherited her mother's beauty and her father's confidence, a combination that attracted attention Scarlett was not quite ready for her 14-year-old daughter to receive. "Boys are starting to notice her," Scarlett told Yates worriedly one night. "I have noticed," Yates said grimly. "I have also noticed my shotgun is very visible when they come calling." Despite his protective instincts, Yates was good with Rose, treating her as an intelligent person whose opinions mattered. He listened when she talked about wanting to go to teacher's college, promised to support her ambitions, and never dismissed her dreams as frivolous. "Our daughter is going to change the world," Yates told Scarlett proudly after Rose gave a presentation to the school board about updating textbooks. She certainly has the determination for it, Scarlett agreed. James, now 8, was showing signs of inheriting his father's skill with horses. He spent every possible moment at the stables, and Yates had started teaching him to train the young colts. It was clear that whatever Daniel decided, James would probably take over the ranch operation someday. In 1893, tragedy struck the community when a diphtheria outbreak killed several children. Scarlett and Yates kept their children home from school for weeks, terrified of losing them. The town doctor worked tirelessly, but medicine had its limits, and parents could only pray. The Jackson children were fortunately spared, but watching her students fall ill and some die broke Scarlett's heart. She attended funeral after funeral, holding the hands of grieving parents, offering what comfort she could from her own experience with loss. "Life is so fragile," she told Yates one night, checking on their sleeping children for the third time. "It is, but that is what makes it precious. Every day we have together is a gift." The outbreak eventually passed, leaving scars on the community. Scarlett threw herself into advocating for better sanitation and medical care, working with the town council to establish a proper clinic. Her experiences gave her authority, and her passion convinced others. By 1894, Nebraska City had a small but functional medical facility staffed by a full-time doctor and 2 nurses. Daniel graduated from veterinary school in 1895, returning home with his degree, and a young woman named Catherine Wright, whom he had met in Omaha. Catherine was a banker's daughter, educated and intelligent, and clearly in love with Daniel. Scarlett saw in her son's eyes the same devotion Yates had shown her, and she welcomed Catherine into the family with open arms. They were married in the fall, a beautiful ceremony that reminded Scarlett of her own wedding 21 years earlier. Watching her son make his vows, she felt the circle of life completing itself, generations connecting and continuing. Rose was accepted to a teacher's college in Lincoln in 1896. At 18, she was more than ready to spread her wings, and Scarlett supported her completely, despite missing her daughter terribly. They exchanged letters weekly, Rose writing about her classes and new experiences, Scarlett sharing news from home. James, now 12, had become his father's shadow, learning the ranching business from the ground up. He had Yates's easy way with people and animals, and Scarlett knew the ranch would be in good hands when eventually passed to the next generation. In 1897, Daniel and Catherine welcomed Scarlett and Yates's first grandchild, a girl they named Sarah Jean Jackson. Holding that tiny infant, Scarlett felt her heart expand impossibly further. The circle continued, life renewing itself, hope perpetuating. "We are grandparents," she told Yates in wonder. "When did we get old enough for that? Speak for yourself," Yates teased. "I am as young as ever. You are 50 years old with gray in your hair. Distinguished gray." Scarlett laughed and kissed him. At 46, she too was showing signs of age, lines around her eyes and silver threading through her auburn hair. But she had earned every mark every year, and she wore them with pride. As the century drew to a close, Scarlett looked back on her life with a sense of peace she never thought possible. She had survived trauma that could have destroyed her, had rebuilt herself from ruins, and had created a life filled with love and purpose. She no longer poured whiskey to forget. Instead, she poured lemonade for her grandchildren, coffee for her husband on cold mornings, tea for her friends when they gathered to discuss literature or politics or the future. She remembered everything now, the good and the bad, and she was grateful for all of it because it had led her here. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the Nebraska sky in shades of orange and pink. "Everything," Scarlett said honestly. "How far I have come, how lucky I am, how much I love you." "I love you too," Yates said, pulling her close. "Thank you for saying yes that day in April, 23 years ago. Thank you for taking a chance on a dusty cowboy who did not know what he was doing." "You knew exactly what you were doing," Scarlett corrected. "You saw past my wounds and gave me a reason to heal. You gave me a reason to remember that life could be good. We saved each other, I think. Maybe we did." As the new century dawned in 1900, the Jackson family gathered together for a celebration. Daniel and Catherine were there with little Sarah, now 3, and their infant son Thomas. Rose had graduated from Teachers College and accepted a position at a school in Lincoln, but she came home for holidays. James, at 16, was a strapping young man who could outwork most of the ranch hands. They raised glasses of champagne and lemonade, toasting the past and the future, remembering those they had lost and celebrating those they still had. Scarlett looked around the table at her family, at the life she and Yates had built together, and felt complete. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Scarlett and Yates stood on their porch under the stars. "I never told you this," Scarlett said quietly, "but back when I first came to Nebraska City, I used to stand outside and look at the stars and wonder if my father could see them too, wherever he was. I would pray that he knew I was trying to survive, trying to honor his memory by living." "I am sure he knows," Yates said softly. "I am sure he sees what you have built and is proud beyond measure. I hope so. I hope he knows that I am happy that I found love again, that I am the woman he raised me to be despite everything that tried to break me." "You are more than the woman he raised you to be. You are extraordinary, Scarlett. You always have been." Scarlett turned into her husband's embrace, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. This heart that had loved her patiently through fear and trauma, that had never wavered or given up, that had taught her what real love looked like. "I want to grow old with you," she whispered. "I want decades more of this of us, of our family. We will have it," Yates promised. "I plan to love you for at least another 50 years. "Only 50? Well, maybe 60. We will see how I feel then." Scarlett laughed, the sound carrying across the prairie. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and closer by, the horses in their pasture nickered softly. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, home. In 1902, Rose married a fellow teacher named Michael Brennan, a good man who reminded Scarlett of Yates in his quiet strength and genuine kindness. They settled in Lincoln, and Rose began advocating for educational reforms at the state level, her mother's daughter in every way. James, at 18, had indeed taken over much of the daily ranch operation, working alongside his father with easy competence. He had no interest in marriage yet, too focused on the land and the cattle, but Scarlett knew that would change eventually. Daniel's veterinary practice thrived, serving ranches and farms throughout the region. Catherine gave birth to their third child in 1903, another girl they named Margaret after Margaret Calloway, who had passed peacefully in her sleep the year before. Samuel Calloway followed his wife 6 months later, his heart finally giving out after 82 years of steady beating. Their deaths marked the end of an era, but their legacy lived on in the ranch and the community they had helped build. Scarlett and Yates ensured their memory was honored, establishing a scholarship for agricultural students in their name. In 1905, Scarlett turned 54 and Yates turned 58. They celebrated quietly, just the two of them, with a picnic by the river where they had spent so many important moments. "You ever regret it?" Scarlett asked as they lay on a blanket, watching clouds drift by. taking on a broken woman with so much baggage. Yates rolled onto his side to look at her, his expression serious. Never, not once. You were never broken, Scarlett, just wounded. There is a difference. And even if you had been broken beyond repair, I would have stayed. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath. That is quite a promise. It is not a promise, it is a fact. Scarlett reached up and traced the lines on his face, the marks of a life well lived. He was still handsome to her, would always be handsome, because she saw him with the eyes of love. I used to pour whiskey to forget, she said softly, to drown the memories and the pain, but you gave me something better. You gave me new memories, happy ones, strong enough to balance the bad. You gave me a reason to remember that life is worth living. You did that yourself, Yates insisted. I just loved you while you figured it out. Just loved me, Scarlett repeated with a smile, as if that is a small thing. It is the biggest thing. The only thing that really matters in the end. They kissed, a sweet familiar press of lips that still made Scarlett's heart flutter after 31 years together. Some things never changed, never faded, never lost their power. The years continued their steady march. Grandchildren multiplied, the ranch prospered, the family grew and evolved. There were more losses, as was inevitable with time. Old friends passed, and each funeral reminded Scarlett of life's fragility. But there was also so much joy. Grandchildren's laughter filling the house during holidays. Daniel's pride when one of his children showed interest in veterinary medicine. Rose's excitement when she was elected to the Lincoln School Board. James's contentment in the land and the cattle, finding his purpose in continuing the family legacy. In 1910, James announced he was courting a young woman named Emma Harrison, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Scarlett liked her immediately, seeing in Emma the same quiet strength and kindness that had drawn her to Yates. They married in 1911, and Emma settled into ranch life with ease. She was a talented seamstress and began teaching local women and girls, adding her own contribution to the community. Scarlett and Emma became close, and Scarlett felt blessed to have such a wonderful daughter-in-law. More grandchildren arrived, and then great-grandchildren as Daniel and Catherine's oldest daughter married. The family tree expanded, branches reaching out in all directions, rooted in the love and sacrifice of generations. In 1915, Scarlett retired from teaching at the age of 64. Her students threw her a party, presenting her with a scrapbook filled with letters and memories from decades of teaching. She cried as she read their words, humbled by the impact she had made on so many lives. You changed everything for me, one former student wrote. You believed in me when no one else did. Because of you, I went to college and became a doctor. Thank you for seeing my potential. You taught me that being smart was something to celebrate, not hide, wrote another. You made me proud of who I am. There were dozens of letters, each one a testament to a life spent in service to others. Scarlett had poured her heart into teaching, using her own pain to recognize and help other wounded souls. Now, seeing the results of that work, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Yates, at 68, was slowing down but still working the ranch alongside James. His hair was completely silver now, his face deeply lined, but to Scarlett he was as handsome as the day he walked into the Lucky Star Saloon 42 years earlier. They spent their evenings on the porch, holding hands and watching sunsets, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes their children or grandchildren would visit, filling the house with noise and life. Other times it was just the two of them, comfortable in their long-established rhythms. Tell me again how you felt when you first saw me, Scarlett requested one evening, a familiar game they played. I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, Yates obliged, as he always did. But more than that, I saw something in your eyes, a strength and sadness mixed together. I wanted to know your story, to understand what had put that look on your face. And when I told you, I wanted to hunt down Charles Whitmore and make him pay for what he did to you. But I also wanted to show you that not all men were like him, that you could trust again. You succeeded, Scarlett said softly. You showed me what real love looks like, patient and kind and steady. You saved my life, Yates. We saved each other, he said, repeating words from years earlier. You gave my life meaning after I lost my family. You gave me a reason to build something lasting. We did build something lasting, did we not? Look at everything we have created together. Yates surveyed their land, their home, their legacy. We did all right, I think. We did better than all right. We built a love story worth remembering. In 1918, the world was at war in Europe, and even in Nebraska City, the effects were felt. James and Emma's eldest son enlisted, and the family worried and prayed for his safe return. He came home in 1919, shell-shocked but alive, another generation dealing with their own traumas. Scarlett spent time with him, sharing her own experiences with healing from trauma. She had learned so much over the decades about resilience and recovery, and she used that knowledge to help her grandson find his way back to himself. The wounds do not always show, she told him. But they are real and they matter. Give yourself time and grace. Healing is not linear. Her words, born from painful personal experience, gave him comfort and hope. Watching him slowly recover, Scarlett felt grateful that her suffering had not been meaningless, that it had equipped her to help others navigate their own darkness. In 1920, women finally won the right to vote nationwide. Scarlett, at 69, cast her ballot with tears streaming down her face, thinking of all the battles fought and won, all the progress made. She wished her mother and Margaret Calloway could have lived to see this day, but she voted for them too, for all the women who had paved the way. Yates, at 73, was having more difficulty getting around. His joints ached and he tired easily. James had fully taken over ranch operations, but Yates still liked to walk the property and check on the cattle when he could. "Stubborn old man," Scarlett would scold lovingly. "Stubborn old woman," he would retort with a grin. They had been married 46 years, together for 48, and their love had only deepened with time. They still held hands, still kissed goodnight, still looked at each other with the wonder of people who could not quite believe their good fortune. In the spring of 1923, Yates fell ill with pneumonia. At 76, his body could not fight the infection the way it once would have. Scarlett stayed by his bedside day and night, holding his hand and remembering their life together. Their children and grandchildren gathered, filling the house with the family they had created. On a quiet April morning, with Scarlett sitting beside him and their entire family surrounding them, Yates took his last breath. Scarlett felt her heart break all over again, but this was a different kind of breaking. Not the destruction Charles had wrought, but the bittersweet pain of losing someone after a lifetime of love. She held Yates's hand long after he passed, memorizing his face, saying goodbye to her partner and best friend. At his funeral, Daniel gave the eulogy, speaking of a father who had taught him integrity and kindness. Rose talked about his support of her education and ambitions. James described his patience and wisdom as a teacher and mentor. The grandchildren shared memories of his humor and warmth. But it was Scarlett who had the last word. Standing before the gathered crowd at 72 years old, she spoke about the man who had changed her life. "Yates Jackson gave me a reason to remember," she said, her voice strong despite her grief. "When I came to Nebraska City 50 years ago, I was drowning in pain and trying to forget everything that hurt. He taught me that remembering could be beautiful, that the past did not have to destroy the present. He loved me patiently and completely, never asking me to be anything other than myself. He gave me a family, a home, a life beyond my wildest dreams. I am the woman I am today because he saw who I could become and loved me while I figured out how to get there. For 50 years, he was my partner, my love, my best friend. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will never regret a single moment we had together. She placed a single rose on his casket, whispering words only he would hear. Thank you for everything, my love. Wait for me and we will start again. In the months after Yates's death, Scarlett struggled with grief. Her children worried about her, seeing her retreat into herself. But slowly, drawing on the strength Yates had helped her build over decades, she found her way forward. She focused on her family, on the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who needed her wisdom and stories. She wrote down the family history, ensuring future generations would know where they came from and what their ancestors had overcome. She also returned to the work she had always loved, volunteering at the school and mentoring young teachers. She helped establish a women's shelter in Omaha, using her own story to advocate for domestic violence victims. The work gave her purpose and meaning, channels for her grief and her determination that no other woman would suffer as she once had. On Sundays, she would visit Yates's grave, bringing flowers and talking to him as if he could hear. She told him about the grandchildren's latest achievements, about changes in the town, about how much she missed him. I am still here, she would say, still living the life we built together, still remembering all our beautiful moments. Thank you for loving me, Yates. Thank you for giving me a reason to survive and thrive. I will love you until my last breath, and then beyond. In 1925, Scarlett turned 74. Her hair was completely white now, her face deeply lined, but her green eyes were still sharp and bright. She moved a bit slower, but her mind remained keen and her spirit unbroken. That year, Daniel's daughter Sarah came to visit, newly divorced and heartbroken. Scarlett recognized that look in her granddaughter's eyes, the same wounded sadness she had once carried. She took Sarah's hands in her own and shared her story, the full truth of what had happened in Philadelphia and how she had found healing. You are not broken, Scarlett told her. You are wounded, and that is different. Wounds can heal with time and care and love. You are stronger than you know, Sarah. You have my blood in your veins, and we are survivors. Sarah wept in her grandmother's arms, and Scarlett held her, passing on the wisdom earned through pain and perseverance. She saw Sarah over the following months begin the same journey she had taken 50 years earlier, learning to trust again, to hope again, to believe in herself again. Watching her granddaughter heal filled Scarlett with a sense of purpose. This was part of why she had survived, why she had endured. So she could be here for Sarah, for all the women who needed someone to believe in them and show them the way forward. In 1928, Scarlett celebrated her 77th birthday, surrounded by 4 generations of family. There were children running everywhere, laughter filling every corner of the house, love abundant and overflowing. Looking around at all these people, all these lives that existed because she and Yates had found each other, Scarlett felt overwhelming gratitude. That night, alone in the bedroom she had shared with Yates, she sat at her desk and wrote in the journal he had given her decades earlier. She had filled dozens of journals over the years, but this one she had saved for the most important thoughts. My dearest Yates, she wrote. It has been 5 years since you left me, and not a day passes that I do not miss you, but you would be so proud of what our family has become. Daniel is respected throughout the state as a veterinarian and community leader. Rose has revolutionized education in Lincoln and is now advising the state legislature. James has made the ranch even more successful than we dreamed, and he and Emma have raised fine children who will carry on the legacy. We have 17 grandchildren and 9 great-grandchildren, with more surely on the way. The Jackson name stands for integrity, hard work, and kindness, because that is what you modeled every single day. The love we built together has rippled out in ways we could never have imagined. I am ready now, my love. I have lived a full life, longer than I ever expected back when I was that broken girl pouring whiskey to forget. You gave me a reason to remember, and I have remembered everything, treasuring each moment we shared. When my time comes, I will go peacefully, knowing I did my best with the life you helped me rebuild. Wait for me on the other side and we will start again, young and whole and together forever. All my love, always and forever, Scarlett. She sealed the journal and placed it in a box with letters for each of her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She had lived long enough, seen enough, given enough. She was ready for whatever came next. On a warm September evening in 1929, exactly 56 years after she had arrived in Nebraska City, Scarlett sat on her porch watching the sunset. The prairie stretched out endlessly before her, golden in the fading light, just as it had been when she first saw it all those years ago. She thought about that terrified young woman who had stepped off the train with nothing but guilt and pain. She thought about the cowboy who had walked into a saloon and seen past her wounds to the person she could become. She thought about the life they had built together, the love that had sustained them through decades, the family they had created. James found her there as the last light faded, sitting peacefully in her rocking chair with a slight smile on her face. She had passed quietly, no pain or struggle, just a gentle transition from one existence to another. At her funeral, the church overflowed with people whose lives she had touched. Former students, fellow teachers, women she had mentored and helped, friends and family spanning multiple generations. They all came to say goodbye to a woman who had transformed personal tragedy into a life of service and love. Her obituary in the Nebraska City News told her story, not shying away from the darkness, but celebrating the light. Scarlett Morgan Jackson, it read, arrived in our town in 1873 fleeing tragedy and trauma. She could have let that trauma define her, could have remained a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Instead, through courage and determination and the love of a good man, she built a life worth celebrating. She taught our children, advocated for women's rights, helped establish social services for the vulnerable, and raised a family that embodies the best of our community values. She is survived by her 3 children, 17 grandchildren, and 14 great-grandchildren, along with countless former students and mentees who considered her a second mother. She will be remembered not for what happened to her, but for what she made of her life despite it. She was buried beside Yates in the town cemetery under a simple headstone that read, Scarlett Morgan Jackson, 1851–1929. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, teacher. She poured whiskey to forget. A cowboy gave her a reason to remember. She remembered and lived and loved. Years later, Sarah would tell the story to her own grandchildren about her great-grandmother who had survived terrible abuse and loss to build a life of love and meaning. The story would be passed down through generations, a testament to resilience and hope, to the healing power of love, and to the truth that our darkest moments do not have to define us. The ranch continued for generations, the land carefully stewarded by Jackson descendants who remembered where they came from. The scholarships Scarlett established still helped young teachers and agricultural students. The women's shelter she helped found still offered refuge and support. Her journals were preserved and eventually donated to the local historical society, a first-person account of westward migration, domestic violence survival, women's suffrage advocacy, and frontier life. Historians would study them, feminists would cite them, and ordinary people would read them and find hope in her words. Because Scarlett Morgan Jackson had done what she set out to do. She had survived. She had healed. She had loved and been loved in return. She had taken her broken pieces and built something beautiful, had transformed pain into purpose, had given her descendants not just material legacy, but a legacy of strength and resilience. She had poured whiskey to forget what happened back east. A cowboy named Yates Jackson had given her a reason to remember. And in remembering, in choosing to live fully despite her scars, she had created a love story for the ages, one that echoed through generations and reminded everyone who heard it that redemption is always possible, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that our past does not have to determine our future. The prairie wind still blows across the land where they lived and loved, carrying with it the whispers of their story. The river still flows past the spot where they first kissed, constant and eternal. And somewhere, beyond the reach of pain and time, two souls who found each other against all odds are together again, young and whole and infinitely blessed to have found in each other exactly what they needed. Their love changed everything. It saved two broken people and created a legacy that would touch countless lives across generations. And that, in the end, is what love is meant to do, not just to make two people happy, but to ripple outward, touching and transforming everyone it reaches, creating beauty from ashes and hope from despair. Scarlett Morgan Jackson poured whiskey to forget what happened back east. Yates Jackson gave her a reason to remember. Together, they built something worth remembering forever.